They assumed she was just another tired passenger, another person irritated by the wait. But when they ordered her to step forward and unzip her luggage, she remained perfectly still. Not from confidence, but because she understood precisely what they would discover, and the consequences that would follow. By the time they comprehended her true identity, the situation had already spiraled beyond control. The only mystery remaining was, who else watching had just uncovered her secret? The storm hammered against the federal facility's facade, water cascading down the glass panels in irregular streams as the queue of citizens shuffled forward inch by inch. Harsh overhead lighting bathed the polished stone floor in an unforgiving white glow, and the atmosphere carried traces of damp fabric and stale coffee. Near the middle of the line stood a woman in her late 30s. According to her identification, her name was Elena Winters. 5'8", ash blonde hair pulled back in a practical bun, steel blue eyes that observed her surroundings with calculated calm. She dressed in understated clothing, dark jeans, leather boots, and a charcoal blazer designed for mobility rather than impression. The metal detectors ahead chirped periodically, followed by sharp commands from security personnel. Someone's keys triggered the alarm. Another traveler's briefcase was emptied and examined. Elena maintained a relaxed stance, her canvas messenger bag resting against her hip. While others around her shifted restlessly or stared at their devices, she stood remarkably composed. When her turn arrived, the junior officer, Agent Brennan, gestured her through. His gaze swept across her features before dropping to her credentials. He angled the card beneath the scanner and his brow furrowed. "This version is outdated," he remarked. "Renewal was due months ago." Elena's expression didn't waver. "I'm here on official business," she stated, presenting a formal letter bearing an embossed government seal. Brennan passed the document to his colleague, a broader man called Rodriguez, who scanned it briefly before meeting her eyes. "Says here you're scheduled for a briefing," Rodriguez read aloud, studying the fine print. "Correct," Elena confirmed. Brennan tilted his head. "What type of briefing?" "That information is classified between myself and the relevant department," she responded evenly. Her vague answer clearly annoyed Brennan. He pointed toward an inspection station against the wall. "Secondary check, please. Move to the side." Frustrated sighs rippled through the line behind her. Elena walked to the designated area without hesitation, placing her bag on the cold steel surface. Rodriguez approached, pulling on latex gloves with exaggerated precision. "What are we looking at here?" he asked. "Personal items," Elena answered simply. "Let's verify that," Rodriguez said. Brennan unzipped the main compartment. At first glance, nothing appeared unusual. Athletic sneakers, a metal water flask, a compact medical kit, a packable rain jacket. Brennan exhaled dismissively. Could have just told us it was workout stuff. But Rodriguez was already probing deeper. He extracted a thick black journal, a wax-sealed envelope, and a small container that rattled quietly when placed on the table. Brennan grabbed the journal and opened it. The interior pages contained neat handwriting, sequences of numbers, encrypted codes, geographical sketches. His eyes narrowed with suspicion. "And this would be?" he asked, his voice dripping with skepticism. "My documentation," Elena replied. "Documentation of what exactly?" Brennan pressed, holding up a page covered in coordinates. "Matters beyond your clearance level," she said quietly, her gaze unwavering. Rodriguez chuckled darkly, his tone now mocking. "Oh, we've got ourselves a mystery woman. What's your guess, Brennan? Spy novelist? Conspiracy hobbyist?" Elena offered no reaction to their sarcasm. She simply folded her arms and waited. The small gathering of curious onlookers began whispering amongst themselves, drawn by the escalating tension. Brennan opened another section of the bag and removed what appeared to be a ceremonial banner and several laminated credentials bearing unknown symbols. His mocking tone shifted to something more probing. "Care to enlighten us about these?" he demanded, waving the cards. Elena glanced at the items. "You wouldn't accept the truth if I offered it." Rodriguez scoffed. "Test us." She remained silent. Behind them, the entire queue had come to a standstill. Even other security staff had paused their duties to observe, sensing something extraordinary unfolding. Brennan lifted a slim metallic badge that had slipped from the bag. Unlike standard identification, it bore no text, only an engraved serial number and a minimalist falcon emblem. His confidence began to falter as he turned it over in his hand. "I need you to explain what this is," Brennan said again. But this time his voice carried an edge of nervousness rather than authority. Elena finally raised her eyes to meet his. "That," she said calmly, "is your signal to return everything immediately and allow me to proceed." But they continued anyway. The atmosphere had fundamentally changed. What started as routine security had become a spectacle that held the entire room captive. Even Rodriguez, who moments earlier had mocked her composure, now moved with greater caution as he continued his inspection. The metallic badge with its falcon insignia lay on the table like an unspoken warning. Brennan examined it closely, rotating it to study the cryptic number etched into its reverse side. "This doesn't correspond to any identification system in our database," he muttered, his earlier bravado completely gone. Elena stood motionless, her blue eyes focused ahead, as though she'd already calculated every possible outcome before they'd made their first mistake. Rodriguez finally broke the silence, gesturing toward another zipper. "Open this compartment as well," he ordered, though his voice had lost its edge. Elena gave the slightest nod. "Be my guest," she said, her voice steady but now carrying a subtle warning. Rodriguez pulled the zipper and retrieved additional contents. A black leather portfolio marked only with a silver diamond, a fabric pouch that clinked faintly when shaken, a folded paper stamped "Restricted Access" in crimson letters. Rodriguez dropped the document on the table and began to unfold it, but Elena's hand moved like lightning, pressing it flat before he could read further. "That," she stated firmly, "is not within your authority." Brennan bristled. "Ma'am, this is a government installation. You don't dictate what we can or cannot examine." But Rodriguez had fallen silent, his attention fixed on the mysterious portfolio. He'd opened it to reveal an official-looking credential bearing Elena's photograph, but no agency name. No standard seal, only the text. Tier 7 Authorization Classified Ops. Below that, a single line. Strategic Intelligence Unit, Nighthawk Protocol. Brennan squinted, trying to read over his partner's shoulder. "Nighthawk what?" His voice dropped to almost a whisper. I've heard stories about something called Nighthawk. Guys in the field talk about it like it's a ghost program. But that's not even in our security reference guide," he stammered. Elena straightened slowly and locked eyes with him. "Nighthawk was never on paper," she said quietly. "That's the entire point." The murmuring crowd grew more animated. A woman in business attire edged closer, fascination overriding her discretion. "What exactly are you?" she whispered, barely audible. For the first time, Elena allowed herself a slight smile, though it held no friendliness. "Someone who discovered long ago that true authority doesn't always wear a badge," she answered. Rodriguez shook his head as if emerging from a trance and reached into the bag's final section. His hand emerged holding tightly folded dark fabric. As he unraveled it, multiple gasps erupted from the watching crowd. It was a tactical jacket, clearly military grade but modern, streamlined, adorned with minimal insignia that no one could identify. On the shoulder patch, the same falcon emblem shimmered faintly beneath the harsh lighting. Brennan ran his fingers across it, his voice barely above a whisper now. Where did this come from?" The question sounded almost reverent. Elena's eyes dropped to the jacket momentarily before returning to his face. "It wasn't acquired," she said coolly. "It was earned. Through service you couldn't comprehend." Rodriguez examined the jacket more closely, then looked up sharply, his face pale. "Some of these markings," he whispered, indicating a faint stitched code on the cuff, "don't exist in any official registry." "Because they were never intended to," Elena replied matter-of-factly. A wave of anxious whispers swept through the observers as everyone exchanged uncertain looks. Brennan swallowed visibly and stepped backward, but then, clinging to whatever authority he felt remained, he crossed his arms defensively. His voice cracked slightly. "This still doesn't explain your purpose here or what's in that restricted document. You'll need to accompany us for extended questioning." The statement hung heavily in the air. Elena didn't respond immediately. Then she leaned forward slightly, her voice low, measured, and absolutely serious. "Are you certain that's the decision you wish to make? You'll need far more than latex gloves to handle what follows." Rodriguez tensed. Brennan wavered, attempting to mask his uncertainty with a forced laugh. "Big words from someone standing in line like everyone else," he said, but his tone had lost all conviction. Elena simply remained still, hands clasped behind her back, waiting, allowing the silence to amplify her point. Then a sharp crackle broke through the tension. Rodriguez's radio suddenly burst to life with static, followed by a clipped, urgent voice. Code Falcon. Code Falcon. All units stand down. Repeat, Code Falcon. Both officers froze. Brennan's face went white. The room fell into absolute silence, every person straining to understand what they'd just heard. Rodriguez slowly reached for his radio, his hand trembling slightly. Confirm, Code Falcon? He said into the receiver. The voice came back immediately, sharper this time. Confirmed. Stand down immediately. Authority en route. The words hung in the air like an invisible weight pressing down on everyone present. For several seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was the rain still beating against the windows and the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Then, from across the atrium, another presence entered. A distinguished man in an impeccable dark suit, accompanied by 2 military attachés, strode through the security checkpoint without pausing. His shoes struck the marble with deliberate, measured precision. His face betrayed nothing, no anger, no urgency. Yet his presence alone seemed to drain the color from Agent Brennan's cheeks. His eyes found Elena instantly. Brennan's voice cracked as he called out, "Excuse me, sir, this is a controlled—" But the man silenced him with a single raised hand, not even glancing in his direction. His voice was calm, yet carried an undeniable authority that commanded the entire room's attention. "That woman," he said, nodding toward Elena, "is precisely where she needs to be." The silence was absolute. Every person in the atrium watched as the suited man advanced. His footsteps resonated sharply against the marble, each one louder than the nervous whispers around him. His expression revealed nothing, no irritation, no rush, yet his mere presence seemed to draw the confidence from Agent Brennan's face like air from a punctured balloon. When he reached the inspection table, he positioned himself directly between Elena and the 2 officers. The air felt heavier, charged with unspoken authority. He let the moment stretch, his eyes scanning the scattered contents of Elena's bag on the table, the journal, the badge, the jacket, before slowly, deliberately reaching into his jacket. He withdrew a black leather case and flipped it open with practiced ease. The gold badge inside gleamed brilliantly under the fluorescent lights. Brennan involuntarily stepped backward, nearly stumbling. Rodriguez froze completely, still gripping the tactical jacket like it might bite him. The man closed the badge with a crisp snap that echoed through the silent room. He studied both officers for a long moment, letting the weight of his presence settle over them like a cold blanket. Then he addressed Elena directly, his voice quiet. "You're behind schedule." Elena's lips curved into the faintest hint of amusement. "Blame your security protocols," she replied. The man's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Then he turned his attention to Brennan and Rodriguez, and when he spoke, his tone was measured, controlled. But every word landed like a hammer. "This operative," he began, pausing to let the words sink in, "possesses clearance that supersedes everyone in this facility. In this jurisdiction, in ways you will never be briefed on, never read about, and never fully comprehend." He took a step closer to them. "You will return her belongings. You will issue an apology, and you will pray, genuinely pray that she chooses not to document how you've compromised a Tier 7 classified agent in front of 24 civilians." His eyes moved between them like a laser. "Do you understand me?" Rodriguez opened his mouth as if to object, but immediately closed it when the man's gaze pinned him in place. Brennan cleared his throat awkwardly, his voice barely audible. "We had no way of knowing—" "No!" The man cut him off, his voice dropping to something colder, harder. "You had no clearance to know. There's a difference. And that difference is what keeps programs like Nighthawk operational, while you stand here checking IDs." The crowd had gone completely silent. The atmosphere shifted from curiosity to awe, tinged with fear. Mobile phones that had been recording moments earlier were now being lowered. Something about the man's demeanor, the controlled fury beneath his calm exterior, and Elena's unshakable presence made everyone realize they were witnessing something far beyond ordinary protocol. Elena extended her hand palm upward without speaking, her expression unchanged. Rodriguez swallowed hard and carefully, almost reverently, returned each item to her messenger bag, the portfolio, the badge, the uniform jacket, handling them with the care one might use with historical relics. His hands trembled slightly as he zipped the final compartment. When finished, he slid the bag across the table to her. She retrieved it with effortless grace and positioned it across her shoulder. Brennan, his voice small and strained now, murmured, "Our sincerest apologies, ma'am. We were merely following standard procedure." Elena finally looked directly at him, and for a moment her expression softened just enough to seem human. "Procedure," she said evenly, "exists to safeguard citizens, not to humiliate them. The moment you forget that, you stop serving and start controlling. Remember that distinction." The words landed with quiet force. With that, she turned toward the suited man, who gave a single, almost imperceptible nod and gestured toward the waiting elevator. Together they walked through the parted crowd, which now stood respectfully to either side, some with heads slightly bowed. No one dared to speak. No one moved. As they entered the open lift, Elena turned back briefly, her composed eyes scanning the room one last time, as if memorizing every face present, every witness to this moment. The doors slid shut, and then she vanished. Outside the facility, sunlight had pierced through the morning overcast, painting the wet pavement in shades of gold. Elena emerged onto the front steps, inhaling the fresh, rain-washed air. The suited man remained at her side, silent initially, hands clasped behind his back. Finally he spoke, his voice quieter now, almost contemplative. "They'll never understand, will they? What you've sacrificed, what you've accomplished, what you've given up to do this work." Elena adjusted her bag's strap and gazed straight ahead at the city stretching before her. "They don't need to," she said quietly. "That's not why we do it." A group of young service members walking past on the sidewalk paused to glance at her, sensing something indefinable, an authority, a gravity they couldn't name. She acknowledged them with a subtle nod as she descended the steps and merged into the city's rhythm, the sound of her boots gradually fading into the urban noise. The suited man watched her go, then turned back toward the building, where through the glass he could still see Brennan and Rodriguez standing frozen at their post, staring at the now empty table. Because some individuals don't require recognition or public celebration, some carry their triumphs and their wounds in silence, in shadows, in places the rest of us will never see, and somewhere beyond the news cycles and official ceremonies, beyond the medals and the parades, they stand watch over the rest of us, not for glory, not for thanks, but because someone has to. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you to never dismiss the quiet strength of those around you, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who values dignity and honor. And remember, here at Hidden Valor we recognize the unseen and the unforgettable. Until our next story, stay aware, stay respectful.